A mother dog weeps while her puppy hangs, trapped and helpless. It's a scene of cruelty that would tear apart the heart of anyone with the slightest compassion. But what no one knows is that the story of a paralyzed girl hides even deeper secrets behind this apparent tragedy. The November sky weighed like lead over the A5 Autobahn. Dense, gray clouds threatened to burst at any moment, mirroring the mood inside the Volkswagen as it slid, almost alone, down the road between Heidelberg and Mannheim. Wolfgang Müller gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, as if the gesture could somehow anchor his fragmented reality. In the rearview mirror, he watched Emma Müller, sitting motionless in her wheelchair, which was adapted to the vehicle's back seat. The girl's 8 years seemed to weigh like 80 at that moment. Her blue eyes, a gift from her mother, stared at the passing landscape without truly seeing it. 8 months of silence. 8 months since his wife had left them forever. 8 months since Emma had spoken her last word. "Are you comfortable back there?" Wolfgang asked, knowing he wouldn't get a reply. Still, he kept trying, day after day, like someone tossing pebbles into a deep well, hoping to hear an echo. Silence was now the Müller family's most constant companion. It had filled the empty spaces left by loss, seeped into the walls of their home in Heidelberg, and now it followed them on every drive, to every doctor's appointment, in every failed attempt to return to normal. The road cut through stretches of the Odenwald forest, where bare trees stretched their branches like skeletal fingers against the sky. Wolfgang adjusted the car's heater. The cold seemed to seep not just through the windows, but through his skin, settling deep in his bones, in his heart. "Dr. Weber said the weather is helping," he commented, more to himself than to Emma. "Maybe we can visit the park this weekend, if it clears up." The girl remained still, her small fingers resting on the blanket that covered her immobilized legs. Wolfgang sighed, feeling each beat of his own heart echo the longing for his lost wife. How do you explain to a child that the world keeps spinning even when her own has stopped? A truck sped past in the opposite direction, kicking up a light mist from the damp road. Wolfgang slowed down, cautious. Life had already taken too much from him to risk anything now. His daughter, even in her cocoon of silence, was all he had left. The car's dashboard showed 4 in the afternoon, but the daylight was already beginning to fade, surrendering to the approaching winter. Father and daughter were heading to another appointment in Mannheim. Another attempt. Another faint hope that some specialist could bring back the voice and movement that trauma had stolen from Emma. The November sky darkened quickly as the Müller family's vehicle snaked along the road, cutting through the Odenwald forest. Wolfgang kept his eyes fixed on the wet asphalt, his fingers gripping the steering wheel. The silence inside the car was almost palpable, broken only by the soft sound of the tires on the damp pavement. In the back seat, Emma Müller watched the shadows of the trees dance against the fogged-up window. Her blue eyes, once so full of life, now held an emptiness that no 8-year-old should ever know. Her folded wheelchair took up the space beside her, a constant reminder of the limitations that had followed her since the accident. "Daddy, stop the car." The words came out like a whisper, almost inaudible. But to Wolfgang, it was as if someone had shouted in his ear. He slammed on the brakes, causing the car to skid slightly on the wet road. "Emma?" Her father turned so quickly he felt a sharp pain in his neck. "Did you say something?" The girl kept her eyes fixed on the window, but her lips moved again. "Stop the car, please." Wolfgang felt a lump form in his throat. 8 months. 243 days of absolute silence since the funeral. 243 days since his daughter had retreated into a world where words did not exist. The doctors at Heidelberg University Hospital had explained that selective mutism was a response to trauma, but Dr. Weber had never guaranteed her voice would return. With trembling hands, he maneuvered the car onto the shoulder and switched off the engine. The silence of the forest enveloped them like a shroud. "What is it, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Emma pointed to something beyond the window, in the growing darkness of the forest. "Someone needs help." Wolfgang followed the direction of his daughter's small, pale finger, but he could see nothing beyond the dense trees and the fog that was beginning to form. "Are you sure?" he asked gently, afraid that any stronger word might silence his daughter again. Emma nodded firmly, a determination he hadn't seen in months lighting up her face. "We have to help, Daddy. Now." Those words, spoken with an urgency that clashed with her usual apathy, made Wolfgang swallow all his doubts. If, after 8 months of silence, Emma was finally speaking to ask for help for someone else, he would not hesitate for a second. Wolfgang parked the car on the shoulder of the road, still stunned to hear his daughter's voice after so long. The biting cold of the Odenwald cut through his jacket as he unfolded the wheelchair and helped Emma out of the car. "Over there, Daddy," Emma whispered, pointing to a spot between the sparse trees. Her father followed her direction, pushing the chair with difficulty over the uneven ground. The sound of desperate whimpers grew louder as they moved through the vegetation. As they rounded an ancient oak, they came upon a devastating scene. A German shepherd with a matted coat was jumping repeatedly, trying to reach something caught on a branch. Her amber eyes overflowed with despair as she barked and cried. Dangling almost 2 meters off the ground, a puppy struggled weakly, its hind leg caught in a tangle of barbed wire. "We have to help them now," Emma said, her voice small but firm. Wolfgang stood frozen for a moment, not just because of the urgency of the situation, but because of the sudden transformation in the daughter who had been silent for 8 long months. "Can you hold her while I climb up?" Wolfgang asked, already taking off his coat. Emma maneuvered her chair closer to the dog, who initially backed away, wary. The girl extended her hand with surprising calm. "It's okay," she murmured. "We've come to help." The German shepherd, as if understanding, approached cautiously, allowing Emma to touch her fur. Wolfgang struggled up the trunk, his heart clenching as he saw the puppy, barely moving now. The wire had cut deep into the animal's skin, and a trickle of blood ran down its injured leg. "Talk to her, Emma. Keep her calm," Wolfgang urged, as he worked to untangle the wire. Emma began to whisper words of comfort, stroking the head of the trembling mother. The connection between them was palpable. Two souls marked by suffering, recognizing one another. With one last effort, Wolfgang managed to free the puppy. He climbed down carefully, holding the small, nearly lifeless body against his chest. The mother dog immediately came closer, sniffing her pup with anxiety. "He's still breathing," Wolfgang stated, relieved. Emma held out her arms. "Can I hold him?" Wolfgang hesitated for a moment, then handed the injured puppy to his daughter. Emma settled him gently on her lap, her eyes shining with an emotion her father hadn't seen since the accident. "We're taking them home," Emma decided, her voice gaining strength. "They need our help." The German shepherd followed them back to the car, her eyes never leaving the puppy in the girl's lap. Wolfgang watched in amazement as Emma spoke softly to the animals. Something was changing right before his eyes. A connection that transcended words was being born there, in the cold Odenwald forest. The German shepherd's gaze revealed a mixture of pain and profound relief. Her amber eyes, still wet with tears, followed every move Emma Müller made with her puppy. The girl, who had remained silent for 8 long months, whispered as she stroked the animal's damp fur. "Liebe," she said. "Her name is Liebe." Wolfgang watched his daughter in astonishment. 2 sentences in less than 15 minutes after so much absolute silence. He adjusted the rearview mirror to get a better look at the back seat, where Emma, still in her wheelchair, held the puppy as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "We need to get him to a vet," Wolfgang said, starting the engine. The road remained dark, with a fine rain making the asphalt shine under the headlights. Liebe didn't hesitate to jump into the back seat when Wolfgang opened the door. The mother dog's instinct seemed to have overcome any fear she might have had of humans. She settled down next to Emma's chair, keeping her eyes fixed on her injured pup. "His name is Hoffnung," Emma murmured, adjusting the small, trembling body against her chest. "He needs hope now." Wolfgang swallowed hard. Hoffnung, hope, in German. A name that seemed strangely fitting not only for the puppy, but for the moment they were living. As he drove along the Autobahn toward Heidelberg, his heart beat unevenly. It wasn't just the puppy that was being saved on that gray November afternoon. In the rearview mirror, he watched the incredible scene. Emma, who had barely reacted to the world since the accident, was now talking and stroking the puppy with a moving tenderness. Her small, pale fingers traced through Hoffnung's soaked fur, while Liebe rested her head on the girl's lap, as if she understood the situation perfectly. "It's going to be okay," Emma whispered to the puppy. "We're going to take care of you." Wolfgang felt his eyes well up. They were simple words, but they carried a strength he hadn't heard in his daughter's voice since he lost his wife. There was a spark in Emma's eyes, a faint but unmistakable glint of life returning. Her father gripped the steering wheel. That unexpected rescue in the Odenwald forest seemed to have triggered something deep within her. Between Liebe's low, grateful whines and Emma's whispers to Hoffnung, Wolfgang felt for the first time in months that perhaps there was a path beyond the pain. When they finally entered the limits of Heidelberg, the sky was beginning to lighten, just like the horizon that was now opening up before this small family, unexpectedly expanded by 2 new 4-legged members. The Müller house, once as silent as a mausoleum, came to life in the days that followed the rescue. The smell of wet fur filled the rooms, mixing with the scent of disinfectant and veterinary ointments that Wolfgang diligently applied to the puppy's wounds. Hoffnung, still fragile, rested in a padded basket that Emma had prepared with her old favorite blanket. The residence in Heidelberg, which for so long had housed only the echo of grief, now resonated with soft barks and the sound of Emma's wheelchair gliding across the wooden floor. Wolfgang watched in amazement as his daughter, once inert and distant, now moved with a renewed sense of purpose. "He needs to eat more," Emma whispered, leaning over the puppy as she offered small portions of kibble, moistened with warm milk. Her delicate fingers touched Hoffnung's still thin fur with a tenderness her father hadn't seen since before the accident. Liebe, for her part, never left the girl's side. The German shepherd, with her sharp, protective instinct, divided her attention between her convalescing puppy and her new human friend. When Emma had nightmares during the night, it was Liebe who noticed first, resting her head on the girl's lap until her breathing returned to normal. Wolfgang started leaving Emma's bedroom door ajar, allowing the dogs to come and go freely. One particularly cold morning, He found the three of them tangled together on the bed, Emma hugging Hoffnung, with Liebe lying protectively at the foot of the bed. "I never thought our house could feel so alive again," he commented to Dr. Weber over the phone, as he watched Emma teach Hoffnung to fetch a small rubber ball. The neurologist, listening intently on the other end of the line, did not hide his satisfaction. "The bond between children and animals can be therapeutic in ways we still don't fully understand," he replied. At night, when her father read stories to Emma, just as they used to before silence settled between them, Liebe and Hoffnung would curl up beside the bed, creating a new routine that brought comfort to them all. The apartment in the residential neighborhood of Heidelberg, once a constant reminder of absence, was gradually transforming back into a home. In the corners where only shadows used to be, there were now scattered dog toys. On the refrigerator, next to the medical prescriptions, Wolfgang began to hang the drawings Emma had started to make again, almost all of them depicting her new, expanded family. In just 1 week, her father realized that it wasn't only Hoffnung who was being healed in that house. A silent yet persistent recovery stirred in every heart beneath that roof. In Dr. Thomas Weber's office at Heidelberg University Hospital, the atmosphere felt different that morning. Wolfgang Müller had secured special permission to bring Libby and Hoffnung along for Emma's appointment, an unusual sight in the sterile corridors of the neurology department. "I've never seen your daughter so responsive," the neurologist remarked, adjusting his glasses as he watched Emma gently stroke Hoffnung's soft fur. The puppy, still bearing visible scars from its rescue, rested comfortably in the girl's lap. Emma whispered something into the dog's ear, and for the first time in months, a genuine smile lit up her face. Wolfgang felt a lump form in his throat. Since the accident that had taken his wife and left his daughter in a wheelchair, this was the first glimpse of the Emma he once knew. "What's happening here is fascinating," the doctor explained, making notes on his tablet. "These dogs are creating a channel of communication that our conventional methods couldn't achieve." As if understanding the conversation, Libby drew closer to Emma and laid her head in the girl's lap. Emma, who had once avoided eye contact during sessions, now looked directly at the doctor as she spoke about Hoffnung's progress. "He can run a little now," she said, in a soft but steady voice, surprising both her father and the neurologist with her full sentence. Dr. Weber leaned in, intrigued. "Emma, would you mind if I ran some tests while the dogs are here?" The basic neurological exams, once torturous and inconclusive, flowed naturally. The animal's presence seemed to ease the child's anxiety, allowing clearer responses and more coordinated movements. "What we're seeing," the specialist later told Wolfgang, "is possibly a case of natural animal-assisted therapy. These dogs are doing what entire teams of therapists couldn't in months." Wolfgang watched through the office window as Emma demonstrated her wheelchair to Hoffnung, his heart swelling with emotion. "Is this scientifically sound? Does it have a medical basis?" he asked. The doctor smiled, putting away his tools. "There are growing studies on animal-assisted interventions. The bond your daughter has formed with these dogs is reactivating neural circuits that the trauma had blocked." Before they left, Dr. Weber made a formal recommendation. "I'll document that Libby and Hoffnung are essential to Emma's treatment. They're not just pets, they're co-therapists." On the drive home, Wolfgang glanced in the rearview mirror and saw something extraordinary. Emma quietly chatting with Hoffnung about the stars emerging in Heidelberg's sky. After 3 weeks with Libby and Hoffnung, Emma finally agreed to return to Schulheim-Neckar School. Wolfgang pushed her wheelchair through the familiar halls, his heart tight with memories of their last visit, before the accident, when his wife was still alive. The principal had approved weekly dog visits as part of the therapy plan recommended by Dr. Weber. On the first day, Emma entered the classroom with just her father, her eyes downcast, avoiding her classmates' curious stares. Emma will be studying with us again, the teacher announced with a warm smile. Let's welcome her with kindness. Whispers filled the room. It's the girl in the wheelchair, someone murmured at the back. Emma shrank into herself, clutching her backpack tightly, her months-long silence feeling like armor against the world. The next week, however, Wolfgang arrived with Emma, Libby, and Hoffnung in tow. The German shepherd walked majestically beside the wheelchair, while the puppy, now recovered, followed with awkward steps. The reaction was immediate. A chorus of oohs and ahs echoed down the hall. "Can I pet them?" asked Lucas, a freckled boy who always sat in the front row. Emma hesitated, then nodded slightly. Soon, she was surrounded by curious classmates, their attention shifting from her chair to the dogs wagging tails and gentle licks. Hoffnung was almost dying when we found him, she explained softly to a classmate. These were the first words many had heard from her in nearly a year. The teacher, seizing the moment, suggested Emma share the rescue story with the class. With a trembling voice at first, but growing in confidence, the girl recounted their encounter in the Odenwald forest. As she described how Libby fought to save her pup, several children had tears in their eyes. In the weeks that followed, Emma transformed from an isolated figure to the center of a small group. On Thursdays, when the dogs visited, her desk was the most popular during breaks. Hoffnung, with his playful antics, drew everyone in. "You're so brave," said Sophia, a classmate who had barely noticed her before. "I would have been terrified to help a strange dog in the woods." The teacher watched, moved, as Emma patiently explained to her peers how Libby could sense when someone was sad. The label of the girl in the wheelchair faded, replaced by Emma, the dog friend. From the doorway, Wolfgang observed his daughter sleeping peacefully, with Libby lying protectively at her side and Hoffnung curled at her feet. It was hard to believe the change in just a few weeks. The day before, Emma had broken into tears over an old photo of her mother. Before Wolfgang could reach her, Libby was already there, gently pressing her head into the girl's lap with a soothing whimper. Hoffnung, still so young, mimicked his mother, placing his small head on Emma's other knee. "It's incredible," Dr. Weber commented during their weekly checkup. "Libby shows behaviors typical of trained therapy dogs. This natural instinct is rare and invaluable." The neurologist explained that some animals have a special sensitivity to human emotional changes, likely detecting subtle shifts in breathing, posture, and even scent. At home, Wolfgang began documenting the dog's behaviors, noting how Libby always positioned herself on Emma's right side, the one affected by paralysis, and how Hoffnung quickly learned to imitate her comforting gestures. The most remarkable effect was on Emma. The girl, once closed off in silence, now spoke in full sentences to the dogs. "Hoffnung, come here," she'd call softly but firmly, and the puppy would obey, as if grasping the importance of each interaction. One Sunday morning, as they sipped coffee on the small balcony overlooking the garden, Wolfgang heard something he hadn't in nearly a year: his daughter's laughter. Emma giggled as Hoffnung clumsily tried to climb into her wheelchair. "Dad, look how funny he is," she exclaimed between laughs. Wolfgang's eyes welled up, and he shared a knowing glance with Libby, who seemed to understand the moment's depth. That evening, while tidying the kitchen, Wolfgang found a drawing by Emma, 4 figures holding hands. A girl in a wheelchair, a tall man, and two dogs. Below, in childish handwriting, it read, "My family." Wolfgang smiled. For the first time since the tragedy, he felt they were finding a path to healing. It wouldn't be easy, but now they had hope. Or rather, Hoffnung. The peace in the Müller home shattered one Thursday afternoon. Wolfgang was tending the garden when he noticed a figure standing across the street, watching their house with an unsettling intensity. The man, of average build and stern expression, seemed to study every detail. Inside, Emma was playing with Hoffnung when Libby, resting at her feet, suddenly perked up. The German shepherd's ears went alert, and a low growl escaped her throat. She bolted to the window, her hackles raised. "What's wrong, Libby?" Emma asked, turning her wheelchair toward the window. Glancing outside, she saw the stranger and felt a chill run down her spine. That night at dinner, Wolfgang mentioned it to Emma. "That man is Victor Schreiber from Altstadt. I've seen him around the market, but we've never spoken more than a nod." In the days that followed, Victor appeared more frequently, sometimes strolling slowly past the house or sitting on a nearby park bench, his eyes fixed on their home. Libby's behavior grew increasingly agitated with each sighting, positioning herself protectively between Emma and the window. On Victor's sixth appearance, Wolfgang decided to confront him. As he stepped outside, Libby lunged fiercely at the sight of Schreiber, her eyes filled with a terror Wolfgang had never seen. "Can I help you with something?" Wolfgang asked, keeping his voice calm despite the tension. Victor smirked. "Nice dogs you have, especially the female. She looks familiar." Without another word, he turned and walked away. That night, Emma woke up screaming. When Wolfgang rushed to her room, Libby was already there, pressing her head into Emma's lap to calm her. "He wants to take Libby away, Dad," Emma whispered through tears. Wolfgang held her close, but his mind raced. Something in Libby's reaction, Victor's behavior, and his growing instincts pointed to a dark connection. Wolfgang couldn't shake the image of Libby trembling at the sight of Victor. Determined to protect his family, he quietly investigated the neighbor from Altstadt. One chilly afternoon, while Emma played with Hoffnung in the yard, he visited a local cafe frequented by longtime residents. Over strong coffee and casual chats, he learned of Victor's troubling history. Neighbors confirmed sightings of him abusing strays, and an elderly woman shared that her cat had vanished after a dispute with him. "He's had issues with animals since he was young," an gray-haired man confided. "There was even an incident with a dog on the road near Odenwald. He chased it with his car." Wolfgang's blood ran cold. The mention of Odenwald and the road triggered memories of that fateful day on the A5, when his wife died and Emma was left paralyzed and withdrawn. The next morning, he confronted Victor in the street. "I know what you do to animals," he said firmly, "and I'm starting to suspect you had something to do with my family's accident." Victor's face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, but his shifty eyes betrayed him. "The German shepherd we rescued," Wolfgang pressed on. "She reacted to you like she recognized a predator. Was she near the road the day of the accident?" Victor stepped back. "It was just a stray dog that crossed the lane. I swerved." The revelation hit Wolfgang like lightning. Victor had chased Libby onto the road, causing the crash that killed his wife and traumatized Emma. Fate had twisted their lives together in cruelty and, strangely, redemption. The dogs Victor had tried to harm were now the ones bringing healing to his daughter. That night, watching Emma sleep with Hoffnung nestled against her chest, and Libby vigilant beside the bed, Wolfgang grasped the painful irony. The man who had destroyed his family had, indirectly, provided their salvation. The truth was bitter, but Wolfgang knew he had to turn it into justice. For his wife, for Emma, and for Libby, whose stories now wove into one of pain and redemption. The courtroom in Mannheim was imposing, with dark wooden walls and high windows filtering winter light. Emma Müller adjusted in her wheelchair, her heart pounding. Beside her, Wolfgang gripped her hand firmly, while Dr. Weber sat behind them, offering an encouraging smile. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" her father whispered. Emma felt all eyes on Victor Schreiber across the room. He seemed smaller now, without his threatening demeanor from Altstadt. When the judge called her name, the 8-year-old wheeled herself to the center with determination. The silence was profound. No one expected a child so young, especially one silent for 8 months, to testify. "Emma, can you tell us what you saw that day in the Odenwald forest?" the prosecutor asked gently. In a small but steady voice, the girl described Hoffnung's rescue. She explained how Libby, in a state of desperation, had tried to save her puppy, who was tangled in barbed wire. Then, to the surprise of everyone in the courtroom, Emma made the connection the adults had missed. "Libby trembles when she sees Mr. Schreiber," she said, pointing a small finger at Victor. "She hides behind me. The same wire that hurt Hoffnung was in his yard. I saw it when we drove past." A murmur swept through the room. Wolfgang looked at his daughter with a profound sense of awe. She had noticed something he had completely overlooked. The neurologist, Dr. Weber, observed his patient intently. It was incredible how Emma, who could barely interact with people just months ago, was now facing an entire courtroom. The presence of Libby and Hoffnung in her life had awakened not only her voice but her courage. "Dogs feel fear and pain just like we do," Emma continued, with a maturity that startled even the judge. "Hoffnung almost died. Libby cried the way my mother would have cried for me." A single tear traced a path down Wolfgang's cheek at the mention of his late wife. The prosecutor then presented the photographic evidence and veterinary reports, all of which confirmed the abuse. When Emma finished her testimony, the entire courtroom seemed transformed. They no longer saw a child in a wheelchair, but a courageous defender of the truth. As she returned to her father's side, she whispered, "Would Mama be proud?" Wolfgang hugged his daughter tightly, unable to contain his emotion. "More than you can imagine, my love. More than you could ever imagine." Emma Müller was always a girl who saw beyond her own pain. As her wheelchair glided through the corridors of the Schule am Neckar, her mind was already working on an idea, one born during the quiet nights when Libby and Hoffnung slept at the foot of her bed. One Sunday afternoon, she surprised Wolfgang with an unexpected proposal. "Papa, I want to create a group to help people who feel lonely, like I used to," she said, her eyes shining with determination. "I'll call it Mama's Engel, Mama's Angels, because Mama always said that helping others makes us angels on earth." A lump formed in Wolfgang's throat. It was the first time Emma had mentioned her mother, without tears welling in her eyes. He nodded, unable to hide his pride. With her father's help, the little girl began distributing hand-drawn flyers throughout the Altstadt neighborhood. Soon, 5 children had joined the initiative. Their first meeting took place in the Müller's garden, where Emma explained her vision with an eloquence that astonished Wolfgang. "Libby and Hoffnung saved me when I needed it most," she explained to her new friends. "Now we want to bring that same comfort to other people." But when Emma Müller announced her Mama's Engel project, the initial response was one of doubt. An 8-year-old girl confined to a wheelchair and barely speaking until a few months ago, organizing therapy visits? Frau Becker, from the corner bakery, was the first to voice her skepticism. That won't work. Children don't have the responsibility for that kind of commitment, she remarked, while handing Wolfgang a loaf of bread on a cold December morning. Emma's father simply smiled, knowing his daughter possessed a determination few adults could match. Only 3 children showed up for the first meeting, accompanied by visibly uncomfortable parents. But Libby and Hoffnung immediately captured everyone's attention. My son hasn't stopped talking about the dogs since that day, Martin Kraus, a local schoolteacher, confessed to Wolfgang during a chance meeting at the supermarket. Perhaps I underestimated what your little girl is trying to do. Their first official visit to the Sonnenschein nursing home was marked by a palpable nervousness. Emma trembled slightly as her father pushed her wheelchair down the silent hallways. Hoffnung, now recovered and strong, walked proudly beside Libby, as if he understood the gravity of their mission. I'm not sure this is appropriate, the home's director murmured, watching the small group approach. Many of our residents are quite frail. But when Frau Schmidt, a 92-year-old woman who hadn't spoken in weeks, stretched out her trembling fingers to touch Libby's fur and smiled, something in the atmosphere shifted. The German shepherd gently laid her head on the old woman's lap, in a gesture that seemed perfectly rehearsed. How did you teach her to do that? An impressed nurse asked. I didn't teach her, Emma replied simply. Libby knows where the pain is. In the following weeks, the number of participants in Mama's Engel tripled. Children from the neighborhood, some with their own struggles, found a role model in Emma. The girl who was once viewed with pity now received invitations to birthday parties and community events. The local newspaper even published a small story about the group. The photo showed Emma with Libby and Hoffnung at her side, surrounded by smiling children and emotional seniors. Below it, a simple caption. Little angels on 4 legs and 2 transform Heidelberg. Wolfgang saved the clipping like a treasure, a living memory of how his daughter had transformed not only her own life, but an entire community. That December, a deep chill settled over Heidelberg, fogging the window panes. Emma noticed Libby's restlessness first. The German shepherd began to pace in circles, scratching at the living room rug. Wolfgang, who was in the kitchen preparing tea, heard his daughter's urgent call. Papa, I think it's happening, Emma exclaimed, maneuvering her wheelchair closer to the dog. He dropped the mug and hurried into the room, where he found Libby panting heavily, nestled in a corner Emma had prepared days earlier with soft blankets. We'll need clean towels and warm water, Wolfgang said, recalling the vet's instructions. Emma nodded, her eyes wide with anticipation. Since rescuing Hoffnung and his mother from the Odenwald forest, she had read everything she could find about the birth of puppies. Hoffnung, now a vibrant young dog, seemed to sense the importance of the moment, keeping a respectful distance as he watched over his mother. The hours that followed were intense. While Wolfgang helped Libby, Emma, with a focus surprising for an 8-year-old, timed the intervals between each birth. The first puppy, a female with a white patch on her chest, arrived shortly after 9 o'clock. Glaube, Emma announced without hesitation. It means faith in German, because we have to have faith even when things seem impossible. Wolfgang looked at his daughter, his heart swelling with love. The second puppy, a robust male, was born 40 minutes later. This one is Mutt, the girl decided. Courage. It was past midnight when the third and final puppy came into the world. He was smaller than the others, but his eyes opened almost immediately. Freud, Emma whispered. For joy, Because that's what we feel right now, isn't it, Papa? Wolfgang couldn't hold back his tears. On that cold night, the apartment that had for so long been a space of silence and sorrow was transformed into a nursery, teeming with life. As Libby licked each of her puppies with maternal devotion, Emma watched with a serene smile. Faith, courage, and joy. The three puppies represented exactly what their makeshift family had found together. With the arrival of the puppies, the Müller home was filled with a new energy. Libby, once a rescued dog in a state of despair, now moved with a renewed dignity, ever watchful of her little ones. Hoffnung, a strong and attentive young dog, rarely left Emma's side. "She seems like a different dog, doesn't she, Papa?" Emma whispered, stroking his soft fur. Wolfgang smiled, adjusting the blanket over his daughter's legs. "I think she found her purpose again, just like us." Their visits to Heidelberg University Hospital evolved into something more. Dr. Weber was astonished to see Libby exhibit the natural behaviors of a therapy dog, instinctively approaching patients in distress and offering silent comfort. "She was likely trained before you found her," the neurologist remarked. "These are behaviors typical of certified therapy animals." With the hospital's approval, Libby began making regular visits to the pediatric ward. Emma accompanied her, guiding her wheelchair through the corridors with newfound confidence. One afternoon, the dog ignored their usual path and gently led Emma to the room of a newly admitted boy who wouldn't stop crying. It took only 5 minutes with Libby's furry head in his lap for the tears to cease. "It's like they have a silent agreement," a nurse remarked to Wolfgang, watching Emma and Libby work together. Two souls who had known profound pain, now helping others overcome their own. Spring arrived in Heidelberg, and with it, the blossoming of Emma Müller's greatest idea. In the city's Central Park, a group of residents gathered for the inauguration of the Emma Hoffnung bench, a wooden bench specially designed for children and their pets. Wolfgang watched with pride as his daughter cut the red ribbon. Beside her, Hoffnung wagged his tail, while Libby kept a watchful eye over the crowd. "This isn't just a place to sit," Emma explained, her voice clear and strong. "It's a place where we can meet and share stories, a place where no one has to feel alone." The sturdy oak bench had been carefully sculpted by a local woodworker. One end was lower, allowing dogs to easily climb up, while the other had space to accommodate a wheelchair. Carved into the center were the silhouettes of a young girl and a dog. In the days that followed, the bench became a beloved meeting point. Seniors would stop to rest and end up chatting with children and their pets. It was more than a piece of park furniture. It was a symbol of the community Emma had built, a testament to the fact that even the deepest wounds can become a source of healing for others. People who once only exchanged formal greetings now shared stories and smiles. One afternoon, Dr. Weber passed by the park during his break from the university hospital and found his patient sitting on the bench, surrounded by 3 children listening intently as she told the story of how Hoffnung was rescued. The doctor sat discreetly on a nearby bench, observing how the girl who had once barely spoken now gestured with excitement, Libby lying patiently at her feet. The Emma Hoffnung Bank became more than just a piece of street furniture. It transformed into a living symbol of the healing power found in connections, shared stories, and mutual acceptance. Even the oldest residents of Altstadt, initially skeptical, now made a point of passing through the Central Park on their daily walks. In just a few weeks, what had begun as a simple tribute to Emma and Hoffnung's journey had become a testament to the transformative power a child and a dog could have on an entire city. The physical therapy room at Heidelberg University Hospital, once a place of frustration for Emma Müller, was now transformed with each session into an arena of small victories. 3 times a week, the girl arrived accompanied not only by Wolfgang, but also by Libby and Hoffnung, who had received special permission from the administration after Dr. Weber proved the therapeutic benefits of the animals. 5 more reps, Emma, encouraged Clara, the physical therapist, as the girl tried to move her toes. The presence of Hoffnung, lying strategically near her feet, provided a motivation that no medical equipment could offer. I feel a tingling, Emma whispered, her eyes fixed on the puppy. Wolfgang watched with a heavy heart, remembering how many times those exercises had ended in tears during the first few months after the accident. Libby, attentive as always, remained by the wheelchair, letting out soft whines of encouragement. The German Shepherd seemed to understand the importance of these moments perfectly, staying calm even in the hospital environment that usually stressed most animals. Every morning before school, she would try to stand for a few seconds, supported between the sofa and Wolfgang. Hoffnung, no longer a tiny puppy but still full of youthful enthusiasm, would position himself strategically to offer emotional support. Papa, I think I felt the carpet, she said one morning, tears in her eyes. Her father hugged her, at a loss for words to express the emotion he felt. The progress, though slow, was constant. Emma could now move her toes voluntarily, and sensation was gradually returning to her legs. The doctors, initially skeptical, documented each breakthrough with scientific astonishment. It's not just the physical presence of the dogs, the neurologist explained during a lecture to medical students. It's the emotional bond that stimulates the brain areas related to motor recovery. On a particularly cold January afternoon, as snow blanketed Heidelberg, Emma felt her calf muscle contract voluntarily for the first time. Libby, as if sensing the importance of the moment, gently licked the girl's hand. They taught me not to give up, Emma confided to her father, as they watched the dogs playing in the snow-covered yard. Just like Hoffnung recovered, I will too. The Müller's garden was decorated with colorful balloons and ribbons that danced in the gentle spring breeze. Emma Müller was turning 10, a milestone that had seemed impossible to celebrate with joy just 2 years earlier. Hoffnung, now a strong and elegant dog, stood vigilantly beside the birthday girl's wheelchair, while Libby supervised her other 3 puppies as they played with the invited children. Wolfgang watched his daughter with a full heart. He had invited not only her classmates from the Schule am Neckar, but also the neighbors from the Altstadt district, the medical team from the university hospital, and everyone who had been part of Emma's recovery journey. Dr. Weber arrived with a gift wrapped in blue paper, the girl's favorite color. "Happy birthday, Emma," the neurologist said, handing her the package. "It's something special to celebrate your extraordinary progress." The girl opened the gift with nimble fingers that had once barely been able to hold a pencil. It was a photo album documenting her evolution, from the first therapy sessions with Libby to the recent gatherings of the Mama Zengue group. As she blew out the candles on her chocolate cake, everyone sang in German, their voices mingling with the joyful barking of the dogs. Emma closed her eyes, concentrating on her deepest wish. It was in that moment that she felt a subtle, almost imperceptible tingle in her toes. The sensation the doctors had said was unlikely, but not impossible. Her eyes widened. "Papa," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I can feel my feet." Wolfgang immediately knelt beside her chair. Are you sure, my love? With determination in her eyes, Emma asked for help to stand. Her father held her by the arms as Dr. Weber quickly approached, observing with professional attention. Hoffnam, sensing something important was happening, positioned himself in front of her, as if offering a point of reference. With visible effort in every muscle of her face, Emma rose from the chair. Her legs trembled violently, but they held her weight. Then, with a concentration that silenced everyone around her, she took a step, then another. 3 faltering steps toward Hoffnam, who remained motionless, as if he understood the gravity of the moment. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Wolfgang was crying openly. Dr. Weber shook his head in astonishment, and even Libby seemed to comprehend the miracle, moving closer to offer support beside the girl. "This is the best gift of all," Emma said, tears streaming down her face, before being enveloped in a group hug that seemed to contain all the warmth of Heidelberg on that spring afternoon. The imposing Mannheim courthouse seemed even larger to Emma Müller that morning. The 10-year-old girl adjusted herself in her wheelchair, while her father, Wolfgang, gently squeezed her shoulder. Libby, wearing her therapy dog vest, remained faithfully by the young girl's side, sensing her anxiety. "Are you ready?" her father asked in a soft voice. Emma nodded, her eyes fixed on the door through which Victor Schreiber would enter. After months of investigation, it had been discovered that the neighbor not only abused animals, but was also involved in the accident that had taken her mother's life and left her in a wheelchair. Dr. Weber had prepared Emma for this moment, over several sessions. "Remember to breathe like we practiced," he had advised the night before when he visited her at home. When Victor entered, escorted by 2 guards, Libby let out a low growl, and Emma stroked the German shepherd's fur, calming her. The man seemed smaller than in her memories, less threatening. "The witness, Emma Müller, may approach," the judge announced. Wolfgang pushed the wheelchair to the center of the room, with Libby walking dutifully beside it. The court had made a special exception to allow the animal's presence during the testimony. With a voice that was shaky at first, but gained strength with every word, Emma began her account. She described the day they found Hoffnam hanging by the wire, how she had recognized in Libby the same despair she had felt when she lost her mother. "I recognized Mr. Schreiber's car that day in the forest," she said, pointing at Victor without looking away. "The same vehicle I saw speeding away after our car flipped on the road." The room fell into absolute silence as the girl continued her testimony, detailing how the dogs had been fundamental to her recovery, both physical and emotional. "What he didn't just take my mother and my mobility," Emma said, with a maturity that surprised even her father. "He almost took my voice and my will to live." When she finished her testimony, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the defense attorney seemed shaken. The judge, visibly moved, thanked the young girl for her courage. As she returned to Wolfgang's side, Emma felt something different. It wasn't just the relief of having faced her fear, but the sense that a painful chapter was finally closing. When the guilty verdict was announced, Emma didn't feel joy, only peace. As they left the courthouse, Libby walked proudly by her side, as if she too understood that this moment marked not just justice being served, but the true beginning of healing. The Müller house, once a place of shadows and silence, now overflowed with life in every corner. The residence in a Heidelberg neighborhood, once marked by pain and absence, had been transformed into a vibrant home, where the sound of Emma's wheelchair wheels mingled harmoniously with human footsteps and canine paws in the hallway. Emma Müller, now 10 years old, alternated between her wheelchair and short, supported walks, each step a victory over what the doctors had deemed impossible. The girl who had spent 8 months in complete silence now filled the house with her melodic voice, telling stories to Libby's puppies while stroking the soft fur of Hoffnum, her faithful companion. Wolfgang watched his daughter from the kitchen doorway with tear-filled eyes. The father, who once carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, now smiled often. The photographs of his wife, once tucked away in drawers because they caused too much pain, now decorated the walls again, as if she too were part of this new chapter. Libby, the German shepherd who had entered their lives on that gray afternoon in the Odenwald forest, rested on the living room rug, vigilant and serene. Her 3 puppies, Glaub, Mutt, and Freud, were growing up strong and playful, each with its own personality, but all carrying their mother's same protective instinct. In the backyard, Wolfgang had built a small ramp to make it easier for Emma to access the garden, where she grew colorful flowers. The same man who once drove tensely along the Autobahn A5 now spent his Sundays teaching the puppies new tricks, while Hoffnum, now fully grown, demonstrated surprising skills as a therapy dog. Dr. Weber's visits became less frequent and more celebratory. The neurologist, who had followed Emma's entire recovery journey, often spoke of the extraordinary case of the girl and her dogs to his colleagues at the university hospital. On summer nights, the whole family, humans and dogs, would sit on the porch to watch the stars over Heidelberg. Emma would point out constellations and invent stories for each one, while Libby rested her head on her lap, as if she too were listening intently. The house that was once just an address in the Altstadt district was now known as a beacon of light in the community. A home where love had conquered pain, where hope had been born from despair, proving that even on the darkest nights in Heidelberg, there was always room for a new dawn.